So with North Carolina parting ways with legendary head coach Mack Brown, there's a lot of discussion around who's going to take this job. And North Carolina is what a lot of folks call a sleeping giant. And a question that I've been seeing floating around on social media lately is what makes North Carolina a sleeping giant? Well, what makes this program such a sleeping giant is because, for one, with how good they are in basketball, the fact that they put a lot of money into their basketball program, their facilities, the resources that they have when it comes to basketball, you have an athletic department that is committed to winning in every sport, which means that if you have money to pour into basketball, you got money to pour into football. Look at what Kurt Signetti has done at Indiana. In only 1 year, he's led Indiana to their best season in the history of their football program. And that's because Indiana has given him resources and more funding when it comes to NIL to have a more competitive team than what they've had in years past. And the same thing can happen for North Carolina if they hire the right coach. You see, what North Carolina is to the ACC is the equivalent to what Texas A&M is to the SEC and what Arizona State is right now to the Big 12. These are programs that have everything needed to become a national championship contender. You got a really good NIL backing. You got great top-of-the-notch facilities. You're in optimal recruiting location to put you in position to land some of the best blue chip talent in America because of the proximity that you are with you not being too far away from Florida. You also have access to recruit some of the Maryland and Virginia talent, plus the talent that comes from out of the state of Carolina. So with you being in the location that the University of North Carolina is, it makes it more easier for you to have success on the recruiting trail, which Mack Brown has brought in some pretty good recruiting classes, and he got Sam Howell and Drake May as well. So if you can hire the right head coach, North Carolina could easily step into that national championship conversation. And for the last couple of years prior to this season, North Carolina has always been one of those teams where they were viewed as a dark horse playoff contender. But the thing that's held them back is they have yet to find the right head coach who can help maximize this potential and help them get rid of the sleeping giant label, because Texas A&M is no longer a sleeping giant because they got Mike Elko. Even Jimbo Fisher had a little bit of success at A&M. So A&M has showed that when they make the right hires, they can be a contender. And Arizona State, they look like they are close to being on that same path with them on pace to make it to the Big 12 championship game year 2 under Kenny Dillingham. Now, for North Carolina, the next question is, who is the right head coach to help you maximize this sleeping giant potential that you have? I feel you should hire Dan Mullen. And I get it that Dan Mullen, as an analyst, is well loved, but as a head coach, there seems to be a lot of bitterness towards him. But Dan Mullen has won everywhere he's been. We seem to forget that in the first ever college football playoff rankings that were ever revealed, Mississippi State was number 1 in the nation, with Dan Mullen being the head coach and Dak Prescott being the quarterback. And he had more success at Florida than any other Gators head coach has had since Urban Meyer stepped down from being the head coach of that program. He's been better than Will Muschamp, better than Jim McElwain, and he's been far better than Billy Napier in recruiting and in on-field success. Dan Mullen's first couple of years, he went to consecutive New Year's Six bowl games. So Dan Mullen knows how to win. And if North Carolina wants to find a head coach who can maximize their potential, Dan Mullen is the guy to do so. Recruiting is something that often gets brought up as a negative when it comes to Dan Mullen, but Dan Mullen didn't do any worse recruiting than what Billy Napier is doing right now. He was recruiting between 11th and 13th in the nation. Now, in this new era of NIL, name, image, and likeness, with you having a good NIL backing, Dan Mullen doesn't really have to put that much effort into recruiting. All he has to do is just buy up the best players available and boom, there you go. But Dan Mullen is an excellent X's and O's coach. If Florida would have had Dan Mullen this year, they probably would have been an 8 or 9 win team. He is a coach that is going to have you ready to play in big games against the best competition on your schedule and against some of the inferior teams on your schedule as well. And with how weak the ACC has been, Dan Mullen, if you hire him, he immediately becomes the third best coach in that conference. The only coaches I probably would put over him are Mario Cristobal and Dabo Sweeney. That's about it. So hiring Dan Mullen immediately would make you a force to win the ACC for 2025 because Dan Mullen is one of those coaches where he doesn't need 2 to 4 years to turn around your program. You hire him, he's instantly going to make you a respectable team. And this year, North Carolina had several losses that if they would have had a better head coach, like against Duke, you win that game. Against James Madison, they don't hang 50 on you. You are Dan Mullen away from being a 9, potentially 10-win program. And that's what makes North Carolina a sleeping giant. They have everything that you could dream of in terms of if you're a head coach looking for a program that can help you compete for a national championship. They're serious about basketball, and looks like they're just as serious about that as they are football with them getting rid of Mack Brown. You don't get rid of Mack Brown, the guy who has led you to bowl games every year he's been a head coach during his second stint, if you don't feel like you can upgrade and do better. And by bringing in Dan Mullen, you have somebody that's been able to win in the toughest conference in college football, that being the SEC. He took Florida to a SEC title appearance, and they gave Alabama a little bit of a dogfight. He got 3 players off that team drafted in the first round. Well, 2 players, Kadarius Toney and Kyle Pitts. Kyle Trask went in the second round. You know, North Carolina, if they hire Dan Mullen, I feel he could be the right coach who can help maximize all the potential that this program has, and they can become the ACC's version of what Texas A&M is to the SEC. A&M used to have that sleeping giant label, and it didn't really take people realizing until what Kevin Sumlin was able to do with Johnny Manziel, the potential that A&M has as a program.